Okay. So, good morning, Ludwig. Did I say it correctly? I think I didn't.
Ludwig is correct.
Ludwig. All right.
Yeah, Ludwig.
Thank you for accepting the invitation to have this conversation, this discussion. I think it's important. We're gonna talk about myths and stories and fairy tales and their symbolism and their significance. So, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and how did you start getting involved with this and researching into myths and stories?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Maria, for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
My start into becoming a book, or my first book that I wrote in 2008. I wrote about money, about the impact that money has on the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
And my field of research was always the mind, the human consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to money when I saw the big impact that money has and the central role that money plays in keeping us in a negative mindset, or keeping almost the whole of mankind in a negative mindset, because we all somehow become prisoners of this monetary system that controls the planet and controls mankind. So I wanted to show that, and it can be logically, analytically shown step by step what exactly is money doing to us. And still I thought, okay, showing what money does for most people would be still a very boring thing to read about. And I felt, because a logical analysis comes from the left part of the brain, and I felt I needed also to provide some pictures or some pictures that help understand the same contents, which would more serve the right half of the brain. And at that point, I felt very drawn to the symbolism in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Uh-huh. Lord of the Rings, for those who don't know.
Particularly the Lord of the Rings, because the One Ring is a very good symbol for our monetary system, and because it keeps redistributing wealth from bottom to top, on, and the top where it's all going to is where the group of people is to become richer and richer and richer and control a whole planet with the system. And of course, this group is, in the symbolism, was Sauron, and then I went into more of the symbolism to show how exactly this shows the effects of our monetary system. So in that way, I first used the symbols in Tolkien's world, and then I went deeper inside to see that there's much more in this than just the monetary system.
Did you read somewhere, or did you do any research to connect the Lord of the Rings with the monetary system? I mean, the symbolism. Were you the one who decided what the symbols meant in the story, or?
I haven't read about any of that. I mean, this whole interpretation work was I did that.
So you did, okay.
So and there may be people who wrote about it, but I don't know. It was my work, and then, well, I have to say on top that a friend of mine, who is also a linguist, he wrote a couple of books about the symbolism in the Bible. That was during the years before I wrote my first book, and I felt that this symbolism that he explained can be applied to all kinds of ancient texts, and that there seemed to be a symbolic language which is kind of universal. Because when you know this, the way he interpreted the original texts of the Bible, you can use that to get access to the Vedic texts from India. You can understand the original Bible text. You can get access. I felt I got access to Tolkien's work because it's the same symbolism, and I also got access to the fairy tales because ultimately it's one universal language, and it's always all about one thing only, and that is human consciousness. It's all about our consciousness.
Will you give us the title of this book, and also give us the title of your book? You haven't mentioned it.
Of my friend who wrote about the Bible. Well, he wrote 2 books which have been published in German only. They've never been published in English, so it will not be very helpful.
No.
It was Geheimsprache Bibel, so the secret language of the Bible was his book.
All right, and yours?
And my book is called Fließendes Geld, which is flowing money.
Flowing money.
Flowing money.
Okay.
Yeah, which is ultimately the solution for the problem that we have with our current system, because, well, I'm showing we will solve the world's problems only once we manage to we, the people at the base, we need to set up our own monetary system and become free from this tyrannical monetary system that controls us. And I'm showing how that can be done in my book.
Very interesting. All right.
And well, yeah, where do we go from here?
Now, I asked you, what did I ask you? No, you.
Yeah, the meaning of the fairy tales for our time. That was one of the questions you asked. Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Yes. So I'm interested, before I say anything, you live in Greece and you grew up in Greece?
Yes, I live in Greece.
You've lived in Greece all your life, basically.
I lived a few years in England, in London.
Yeah. Me too.
I married an English guy.
Okay.
I brought him here. We have a family here now. And yes, but I'm Greek. I grew up here.
Yes, but the old fairy tales, which come basically from Germany, they are part of the Greek culture also. You grew up with them?
Yes, absolutely.
You know them. So like Snow White and the Dwarfs and all this.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I think
they're more or less universal now.
Yes, I didn't want to use the word universal, but yes. Yes.
Or at least they are part of Western culture. So
definitely.
The Western people know them.
Definitely, yes, I think. Definitely, yeah. Europe and the US.
North America.
Yeah. Europe and the North American, yes. I think we all grow up with the same stories. After all, we all, watch Disney movies, if nothing else.
Yeah, well, Disney have made a great job. And
so there you go. Yes.
And, spreading them at least, yeah.
So I have this question. How does someone gains access to this symbolism to write a story, to write a fairy tale? Is that unconsciously, or how is this process going on?
Well, my first access was really to the Lord of the Rings, and then I also wrote books about that. And then I felt, okay, if I get such good access to what Tolkien is telling in his story, And the language of the fairy tales is more or less it's more or less the same symbolic language with different figures, but the content, the target of what the symbolism referred to is the same structures in the human mind.
Yes, but
So I felt, huh?
My question was, Tolkien, for example, since we're talking about the Lord of the Rings now,
Yeah.
was he conscious? Was he aware that he was using symbolic language, or it's a process that it's happening naturally when you conceptualize and you write down a story?
That is a very good question.
Yeah.
It is a very good question. I have no definite answer to that.
Mm.
I only see that, how to say, there is modern authors who conceive of fairy tales, and they write modern fairy tales. But if you, like the Danish Andersen, or
Yes.
in Germany there was called Hauk, who wrote certain modern fairy tales. But if you go into those, they don't have the depth of the ancient fairy tales. They are more like analogies and like, the emperor's new clothes, which is an analogy of what we are doing. But the fairy tales, they go deeper into the human spirit. And what I found about Tolkien is, for some reason that I don't understand, he had the same depth of symbolism than the ancient texts. He was not a typical modern writer whose symbolism only went to a certain depth and not deeper, but he went really deep, just like the ancient masters from very old.
The ancient masters
fascinating
from
to me.
what?
From very old. I mean, we don't know who made the fairy tales. The authors are unknown. They must be very old. In my eyes, they were very old masters who wrote them, because they go so deep into the human spirit. And so I have no answer why Tolkien had that depth.
So can we say that these very old ancient authors had access to something, to some kind of knowledge or
higher knowledge? They knew something about the human spirit. Yeah.
Right.
They knew they had a higher knowledge, and their name is nowhere ever mentioned. Nobody knows who wrote Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's just been handed on and on and on and on and on until eventually it was written down.
So you're talking specifically about these stories, not fairy tales and stories that we know, the authors, the more recent ones.
Exactly, we know the ancient ones. I'm not excluding that a modern author couldn't write the same quality, but those who I see where the name is known and we know they are from the 18th century or 19th century, they don't have the depth that I see in the ancient ones.
Okay.
But I see the same depth with Tolkien, which is the most amazing thing to me. Well, I myself wonder, how did he know? I have no answer to that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he was part of, I don't know, a system or a brotherhood or, I don't know, something that he had access to, deeper knowledge.
Yes, although I think the knowledge that he has does not come from any brotherhood, because it's a very deep spiritual knowledge, maybe from some spiritual master. If he just happened to be one himself, and an unrecognized master, which could be, because he was a very humble man. Who knows? Well, there's in my interpretation of Tolkien, there's two levels. The one level is that I make an interpretation of this of these symbolic figures and the symbolic action they make, and which is entirely spiritual, and all the figures are first entirely spiritual. Like Gandalf is this the power of discrimination, the power of wisdom. That's for instance Gandalf. And you can, what I did is when I interpreted those texts, and I could see that there were certain consciousness processes which he described, and I felt, well, this can be ascribed to certain historical events that happened. And after like 2 or 3, I thought, well, there's a chronology there. There's the same chronology in the Lord of the Rings that we have in our history. And when I saw that, I thought, well, what if? And then became a big experiment. What if I make an interpretation of the whole thing that you wrote, and then see if I can assign every step to certain historical events that happened.
Which chronological event you're referring to?
What you can see, for instance, is the outbreak. What I could clearly see is the outbreak of the First World War. That was the moment when Gandalf crosses the bridge of Khazad-dûm, and the Balrog goes after him and challenges him. And he first defeats him, but then the Balrog pulls him down into the abyss also, right? Yeah. So that was, in the context of everything else, that was the moment of outbreak, because as I say, Gandalf is this clear power of discrimination people have to distinguish between the relevant and the irrelevant, the transient and the eternal, being able to clearly distinguish things. That's Gandalf, because he always is the one who who thinks properly, most properly. And what happened, the passages before he falls into the abyss is full of negative symbolism. So they go to Moria, and there's no dwarf living there. There's eventually only orcs. Or before even they get to Moria, they try to cross the Misty Mountains, and they couldn't. And then they were attacked by wolves or by wargs, which was all a symbolism of growing hostility. Growing hostility. And when you assume, as I did, that Tolkien is there describing collective processes, collective consciousness processes, and you could see there was an atmosphere of growing hostility in Europe. I always see what he did in Europe. I always how to say, from my perspective, Tolkien is always writing about the Western world, what is happening in the Western world, in the Western culture. That's what he's talking about. And so when the First World War broke out, people got into a war hysteria, and they just stopped thinking. And the ancient symbol for anger and hatred, which came from the Silmarillion, is the Balrog. The Balrog is the symbol. He has these
whip.
The whips of fire, right? Yeah. And that's the fire contained in anger. So when Gandalf falling into the abyss was that the power of proper discrimination in the European mind disappeared at the beginning of the First World War. People just went into this war hysteria and started killing one another for years. And that only slowly recovered after that war, eventually. But before that power could really recover, we already had the Second World War coming. Yeah, and that's also there, which is the battle for Helm's Deep. There was some processes that happened during World War II. And with Helm's Deep over, I'm just going to make a quick run through here. You've read The Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I've read also the Silmarillion and the Hobbit and the
you know the whole.
Yeah, I've read everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I have by now published 2 ebooks about Tolkien in English, which I can also send to you.
Oh yes, definitely.
They can be acquired on my website, which I can also give to you later for the video description.
Yes, please.
And so, what happens after this Battle of Helm's Deep, where they defeat Saruman? Saruman is a figure for the European nationalism and fascism, which kind of ended after World War II. Saruman's power was broken after the Battle for Helm's Deep, which means that the way fascism came to power through being elected by the people, that will never happen again the way it did happen. Right? That's in the symbolism. And after that, Gandalf went to Gondor because he expected the final battle to be in Gondor. And Gondor, the symbolism is so deep. I call my book The Nineness because I show that the human mind has nine areas where that makes up who we are as a human being. And we have 3 spiritual areas, 3 mental areas, and 3 energetic areas. And the spiritual level is symbolized by the elves, because that's the part in us that is immortal, that we take into this world and we take out of this world again. That's the immortal elves. So then the energetic mind is, in Tolkien's world, is symbolized by the dwarves. And the mental mind, which ultimately makes us into humans, by the men. And there is 3 realms of dwarves, which is the Erebor Mountain, the Iron Mountains, and the Moria. And then there's in Silmarillion's also 333, but in a different way. Let's not go into that now, but it's always 333 because we have 3 spiritual parts, 3 mental parts, and 3 energetic parts. And the kingdom of men is also 3. It's Rohan, it's Arnor, and it's Gondor. And the elves, there's 3 elven realms, which is the Wood Elves, the Rivendell Elves, and the Lorien Elves, which is the 3 different parts of our spiritual being. So in his symbolism, the entirety of the human mind is represented there. And on the negative side, these nine parts are, for instance, one of the symbols for the negative side of everything is the 9 Ringwraith, because it's this power symbolized by the 1 ring that pulls all areas of the human mind into negativity. That's the Ringwraith. So it's very complex, and I can't go into the entire complexity. But Gondor is the part that deals with the law, with integrity and righteousness. And what happened not long after World War II was that the people who tried to enslave mankind, they started a war to destroy the integrity of the Western world, the integrity of the Western people. And the first attack was on Osgiliath, and then they went to the Pelennor Fields, right?
Yeah.
And Osgiliath is one of the places where they kept the 7 seeing stones in Old, which is the 7 human chakras, right? I wrote only one book only to explain the symbolism, only on the symbolism, without any interpretation of what he's talking about, only to say, because it's very complex. But Osgiliath is the lowest chakra, and Sauron's attack on Osgiliath was what they started that war for the destruction of Western families with. Is the start of it was the sexual revolution. It's an attack on the lowest chakra, and what they started through Hollywood to destroy the sexual integrity of the Western people, to destroy the families, was that was the attack on Osgiliath, and that went very quickly, which shows that the success of the sexual revolution in the 1960s was very, very quick. There was very little resistance in the people against this revolution. And then came the battle on the Pelennor Fields, which has been raging really in our world since around 1970, which was all about spreading selfishness and destroying, spreading materialism and destroying the families through a very selfish attitude towards life, where everybody is told, well, look for what you want, look for your own needs, and do whatever you want. And that was meant to destroy the families. That's what we are seeing in the Western world, that the families have basically been destroyed. And all that he has depicted in his work, and it's an ongoing battle. And we are today at a point where we can actually, although nobody hoped that it would be possible, we will actually, according to the symbolism, we are managing to create that turnaround today. We will.
So you're saying that we haven't gone beyond these two. We're still on that battle. We are still battling.
Yeah, that battle is still going on. Yeah.
So Tolkien in his book went into the future.
He went far into the future, beyond his own time. Okay. Yeah. So he was a visionary. Mm-hmm. And if you ask me now, how could he know? I have no idea. I have no idea. Maybe he was really just a channel. It was given to him. And there is one scene that makes me think that he was given some insight, because when the Fellowship after Gandalf's fall into the abyss in Moria, the Fellowship comes to Lorien, and before they leave Lorien again, Galadriel calls Sam and Frodo to have a look, and offers them a look into her mirror. Yeah. Right. And Frodo is shown things that are far in the future, where he actually sees the ships, the sailing ships of the Corsairs of Umbar approaching Gondor, which is the ships where ultimately Aragorn is sailing with to bring the shift in the battle on the Pelennor Fields. Don't know if you remember. So that was very far into the future. And what is shown there is that some person at that time, first let me say, Gandalf's fall was September 1914, the beginning of World War II, right? And the point in time where this happened.
World War II or World War I? Because
Well, World War One. Sorry, did I say World War One? No. 1914. World War One. And the moment where Galadriel shows Frodo the mirror, in my interpretation, it must be in late 1917, so 3 years later. And when I was meditating about who is given this look into the future, the answer I got was that it was Tolkien himself. And he was shown when he was 19. When he was from 1893. He was just 24 years old, and he was in England at the time. He didn't fight at the front at that point. He was with his wife, and he had a rare time out, which he must have enjoyed as if he was in heaven. At that point, he was very, very, very happy. And I think during that time he must have had a vision where he was shown things that are to come, and he put that into the Lord of the Rings by Galadriel showing Frodo in the mirror what is going to happen in the distant future. So he had some foreknowledge, but of a kind that I also think there can't have been any human being that he was able to tell what he was being shown. So I think he kept it all to himself, and he started to put it into his books, all that he was shown. That's my assumption. I don't know for sure, but that's what makes most sense to me about how much did he know. The question of how much did he really know, and why did the symbolism go so far into the future? Yeah. So now we are stuck with Tolkien, and we wanted to go into the fairy tales, but we can stick there if you want, if you have more questions.
No, since you started,
we could go deeper and deeper, because it's so. I mean, it's all in my books, but it's so. I mean, the symbolism is so complex, and it's all elements of the human consciousness, and the human consciousness is very, very, very complex.
Yeah. So, okay, we use Tolkien as an example. So basically, you're saying that the authors of these stories, must, according to your, conjecture, they were given somehow this foreknowledge. They had access to another realm or something like a channel. Somehow they had knowledge about future events or about what's really going on underneath the surface, and the only way they could communicate that with the rest of the people were through their stories. Did I understand?
You could say that, yes. Yeah.
All right, I understand.
Actually, in case of Tolkien, with the fairy tales are not necessarily about our future. The fairy tales are about specific aspects of the human mind.
The human condition.
Yes, because the human condition and the problem that we have, how we separate ourselves from ourselves and stray from who we are, stray from truth, and need to find our way back to our true self, back to truth. And that's basically what the fairy tales are all about. Because when you have the happy end of the fairy tales, it means the process has been solved,
completed.
The problem has been solved. The process has been successful, and people are back to who they really are. And that's what the fairy tales are all about.
Is God relevant to these stories, or he's irrelevant? The biblical God, from the God from the text, from the scriptures, from the old text. Because that's also a story in the Bible. It's a story.
What do you mean, a story?
the Old Testament, for example, it's
Yes.
whether people believe it's a true story of humanity or not. It's a story. It tells our story. So we could say that the Old Testament is also a story.
Yes. How to say? In that sense, to me, God is formless, and God has a form also. God can take on forms, and the formless, as such, is not part of the fairy tales.
Excuse me, Ludwig. We have 1 minute. I wasn't paying attention.
Okay.
Let's stop here, and we'll start the second recording.
You ask a question again, right?
I will ask the question again. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. See you in a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me. Okay. We're both in a very good condition. Okay.
Yeah, but
so I asked about the story in the Old Testament.
Yes.
And I said that we could also say that the Old Testament is a very, very old story from unknown writers, like Tolkien story, like the very old fairy tales.
Yes.
So how would we approach that, and how is God relevant to these stories, or the Old Testament is a completely different category on its own? How do you approach that? That was my question.
Yeah. So we go to the Bible now, or
yes, but
yes, the thing.
Yes, but as a story, I mean.
Yes. So I said that I mentioned that the language of the Old Testament, of the Bible, is the same, virtually the same as the language of our northern myth and fairy tales, and of Tolkien's world, and of the Vedic texts of India. And in my understanding, since I read the books of Alexander Stefanovich, I would have to say that the common translations that we know of the Bible, there's one big problem. The ancient texts, the ancient Hebraic texts, they refer to, they are very symbolic. They are a very symbolic language, and they refer to inner processes in the human mind. And there's certain elements in the mind which are merely internal, which is only our consciousness, but they have been translated as if it was about something in the external world. We can go through one.
Say that again. I'm not sure I understood that. Could you repeat that?
The texts of the Bible are only about the inner cosmos, the inner human cosmos, but they were translated as if it was about things in the outer world. If it was about Israel and Egypt and Babylon and Canaan and areas in the outside world, which it wasn't. And we can go through one example there to show what's really in those texts, if you want.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there is. By the way, I don't know. I mean, Alexander. Before I start, Alexander Stefanovich, his books have not been translated into English, but he bases his work on a German Jew he was called Friedrich Weinreb. And he did a lot of...
A German Jew?
Yeah, German Jew.
Yeah.
He died some years ago. He's no longer alive, but he made most of this work to show that really the ancient texts, the biblical texts, they are all about the human consciousness. There's nothing in the external world. So so as an example, the term, now I have to include the vocal the vocals now, because it's the language had only consonants, right? Mizrajim normally is what they translate into Egypt, is Mizrajim in the ancient text. And Mizrajim is the world of time and space and duality, right? And this
they translate it into Egypt.
Yeah, and they have just translated that into Egypt, right?
How come?
Yeah, well, that's been done like that. It's been done like that. So, and it's been done like that for 2,000 years and more. Or depending on the history, there's so many people now who doubt that the history was the way it was, but that's a different topic. Maybe it was only 1,000 years ago. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm aware of that theory. Yes.
Yeah, that's not the topic now. We can't cover everything. So there's a term called Fr, which has been translated into Pharaoh, which means the human ego, right? And there's another, this Yisrael is a human human consciousness in duality, and Judah, which means the lion, is really refers to the parts of our consciousness which are spiritual. To actually what the elves are in Tolkien's world. Mm-hmm. That's Judah in the ancient text, which was translated into Jews, right? So the inner part, if you take the inner part, the inner parts of our consciousness and the spiritual consciousness, and you also have the mental and the energetic and the other parts. It speaks of the Judah is an expelled people, which are a segregated people, which means in the original text that our spiritual consciousness was expelled from unity, or has lost unity, right?
Who expels?
Well, expelled is maybe the wrong term. It's we expelled ourselves. Our souls left unity. We lost unity. We lost the unity vision that everything is God, and we came into through developing an ego, and we came into this world as a human being, which is in duality, which is this Mizrajim condition. We came into time and space because our spiritual self lost the awareness or the vision of unity, right? That's what is in that text, in the original text. And
I'm a bit confused with the example of Judah, because I might be wrong, but if I remember correctly, Judah attacked his brother, and Judah expelled his brother from Israel, let's say, and then his brother had to go to Egypt. That's the story in the Old Testament.
When I talk about Judah, I don't mean a certain person. I mean
I'm sorry.
The people of Judah.
Okay, I understand. All right.
Yeah, the people of Judah.
Okay.
And people, what is translated as people, is a collection of the elements of consciousness, right? And it's ultimately it's Moses who has to collect the people of Judah he collect them together so they can leave Egypt to go through the Red Sea and escape into Canaan. So that is.
It wasn't the people of Judah; it was the people of Israel.
Yeah, Israel. Well, Israel is a larger notion, which is not only the spiritual consciousness, but all three levels: spiritual, mental, and energetic. Of course, we have to get the different levels.
They represent the unity of
not the unity. The unity is Canaan. No, the entirety, not the unity. The entirety.
Yes.
The entirety of the consciousness, right? And the spiritual is only a portion of that. And I'm trying to convey here that this is entirely an inner picture. It's nothing to do with Egypt. It's nothing to do with Egypt. Yeah.
You're saying that it's not a historical text. It's a spiritual text.
Yes, and there is no chosen people in the Bible. There's only a people who lost unity and were therefore had to go to Mizrajim, to duality, and then have to find a way back to unity, back to Canaan. Right? That's what what is translated as Red Sea is the sea, and a sea or a water body is always another symbol for duality, because you have two shores, 1, 2, which is duality. And when you cross in a spiritual text, when you cross an ocean or when you cross a sea, you're passing through duality in order to get to the other shore. Means you're passing through duality in order to find your way back to unity, which is our true home, right? Mm-hmm. Which is our soul's true home is unity, where we've come from, the place where we were with God, so to say. And so the task is, when we are in duality, is to collect the entire people of Israel, so all our parts, our entire consciousness, to make.
I lost you for a couple of minutes, maybe less, not a couple of minutes, maybe one.
Sometime, yeah.
Yeah. You were saying that the Red Sea symbolizes, the dualism with the two shores, and we have to cross from duality back to unity with God.
Yes, exactly. And unity, that is Canaan. Ka is the direction. So it's the direction we have to go towards unity again, Canaan. And so he goes to the Red Sea. The Red Sea opens. The Red Sea opening means that if you do the spiritual work properly and collect your own consciousness, all the elements of your consciousness, if you collect them properly, meaning you are completely aware of who you are and the different levels of your own consciousness, so that you really know who you are, then you can actually come to the point where you can leave duality. Duality opens up, so the Red Sea opens, the water opens, And that is a critical moment, but because the moment when the ego loses control, when the ego who wants to keep us in this dual world, when the ego loses control, it comes and tries to seize control again. So the Pharaoh is coming after him and trying to catch him and bring him back to Egypt. That is also an inner picture, like everything is an inner picture, that the human ego is trying to stay in control. So at that moment, you could say we need divine grace for the process to be successful. So if the process is successful, means we can go through, we can go out, we can leave duality, we return to our true home, which is unity, which is love without any other, love without any opposite, just love. That's unity. And then the Pharaoh drowning in the Red Sea means, okay, the ego doesn't get its control back, but disappears. And then we have escaped this world of duality that's been controlled by ego, and we return to our true self, to our true home. And basically, you knowing the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings, the symbolism in Tolkien's world is very similar, because it's the elves who have to leave Aman. Mm-hmm. They have to go to Middle Earth. They go through a very, very, very long time in Middle Earth with lots of suffering and problems and trouble and conflicts. But eventually, it's their destiny to return to their true home, which is Aman. And at the very end of the Lord of the Rings, they actually manage to go home.
Yes, but the elves represent only 1/3 of us. It's not unity.
They represent only 1/3 of us, yes, but that's the eternal self they represent.
So they leave behind the other 2/3. They leave behind the mind and the
yes. They
active.
leave the men and the dwarves behind, and the hobbits. Hobbits are habits. Huh? That's an additional level of human consciousness.
Yes, but a habit saves the world in the end.
Yeah, it's a habit. It's the habit of, or put it differently, humans tend to function in habits. And if we use this tendency to function in habits in a positive way, so that we use our habits positively, then it's the ability to develop positive habits that will ultimately rescue us. And it's Gandalf who sees the value of the hobbits.
Yeah.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly.
Okay. Okay. It's Gandalf who sees the potential of the hobbits, because he sees, which means that if we use habits properly, if we develop positive habits, then we can use this tendency to function in habits to our spiritual advantage and help us reach the goal, right? Reach the spiritual goal. And the spiritual goal is individually, it's our personal liberation is the goal, and collectively, the goal is that we reach an era of peace and understanding where the whole of mankind can prosper. That's the collective spiritual goal that we have, I would say.
I've never heard of that, philosophy, but I don't know how to call it, and before, because usually they tell us that we need to break our habits, that our habits are wrong. They're tied to this, level, physical level. We need to break them.
Yes.
We need to break free from our habits. That's what usually we've been told. Now you're
But if you
telling
look at
us that we can transform them, basically.
Yes, but we can use habits in a positive manner. Do you remember the Hobbit lore at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, where Tolkien writes a whole chapter about where did the hobbits come from, which hobbit tribes exist, which hobbits are most numerous, and where do they live? You
I don't
that?
remember the details, of course.
Yeah, so there's the Half-Foots, there is the Half-Foots, I think oh God, I have to keep thinking in two languages here.
I know that's difficult. I feel you.
It's the Half-Foots, which are the most frequent ones, the most common ones. And then there's those Stoors, I think, yeah. Stoors is the second one, which live basically by the rivers, such as Gollum did. He was a Stoor. And then there are the Fellowhides. And the Fellowhides are a bit bigger than the others, and they tend to be leaders if different Hobbit tribes live together. So, and that is a lore explaining the three different gunas. I don't know if you've heard of the guna teaching from the Vedic scriptures in India.
No.
So, which means we have tamasic habits, we have rajasic habits, and we have sattvic habits. And tamasic means inertia and not doing anything. Rajasic means constant activity. And sattvic means to find a balance between the two, to find a balance between inertia and activity, which is suitable for spiritual growth. And the hobbits that are important for the story, basically Bilbo, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, they are all Fellowhide hobbits. They all represent sattvic habits. And
the balance.
The
balance between activity and
sattvic, which means there's a balance which is suitable for spiritual growth, and in particularly the quality Merry symbolizes is merriness, staying joyful on the spiritual path, right?
And Pippin?
Pippin means lightheartedness.
Okay.
Not to allow your heart to become so heavy that you're drawn down by a heavy heart. Keep your heart light. There's a downside to a lightheartedness is if you take things too lightly, it is also dangerous.
Yeah.
So whenever things happen where things are taken too lightly, it's Pippin who does them. It's always Pippin.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, because that quality is very much necessary, but it's also dangerous. Because you have to be serious also on the path. You have to be serious about where you want to get to. And Sam symbolizes the habit of staying optimistic no matter what.
Yeah, I would have guessed that. That's what I would say about Sam.
Yeah, staying optimistic no matter. Even if there's 1,000 arguments, well, it's better we give up. We have no chance. The dark powers on this planet are so strong. Let's just give up. We have no chance. We will all be slaves. And no, never accept that. Never. We all need that Sam within us.
Yes.
Never
Sam
give
saved
up.
the day in the end.
Never give up.
And Frodo?
Yeah. And Frodo goes along with Bilbo, and he has the habit of making use of our common sense. just like Bilbo. And the difference is that Bilbo is the right part of the brain, and Frodo is the left part of the brain of our common sense. So there was a change in the way people were thinking around the turn between the 18th and the 19th century, because people of old they were more thinking with their right brain, telling a lot of stories. There were people traveling to the country, and they were always invited, tell a story from your travels, and people were very much functioning in these stories and pictures that they were having in their mind. And then along with some changes that we had, particularly in the Western world, towards industrialization, towards development of the school system, things like that, the thinking shifted more to the left. And that is the shift from Bilbo to Frodo.
Mm-hmm.
And the left part, which is more analytical and dry, is Frodo is a much more boring character than Bilbo. Because Bilbo is writing these poems and stories, and he's singing.
He had fantasy, yeah.
Yeah, that's this part. But Frodo, he's always like, okay, we have this problem, this problem, this problem. What do we do now? We have this and this and this. What do we do?
Mm-hmm.
It's just common sense. Just common sense. Very, very boring aspect, but the most important aspect we need our common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because
and they were carrying the One Ring all this time.
Yes, and which is the problem of our time. We have to solve that with our own common sense, right? We hear so many things that we can't judge. Well, what should we think about this happening and this happening? But ultimately, our path we all have to find with our own common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we have to make the judgment. What do we do?
Okay.
And that's Frodo.
Yeah, I understand. Because it's now after an hour. I'm gonna let you go. But before I let you go, yes. I would like to ask, since we're talking about talking now again.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating. I think it's a fascinating story, and Tolkien was a fascinating person, apparently, that he conceptualized that and wrote it down. So you told me that he sees into the future. He writes about things that haven't happened yet, because we're still in the battle outside the gates of Gondor. I'm sorry, not Gondor. Yes, Gondor.
Gone outside of Minas Tirith, yes.
Outside Minas Tirith, yes. So, do you know what's the rest of the symbolism? Where then they enter into the city, they break the walls, they break the doors, they go into the city.
That was at the very beginning only, and before the Riders of Rohan came.
Yes. But that hasn't happened yet, according to...
No, that has happened. That
has happened. Okay.
You see, there's some symbolism which recurs on different levels. And there are 7 places in Middle Earth that had the seeing stones of old. And Minas Tirith was one of them. And Minas Tirith itself has 7 city walls.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and the representing the defense aspect of our chakras. And you see, when at the beginning of the battle, the armies of Mordor conquer Osgiliath very quickly, and then they go to the Pelennor fields, and then they take the first wall. It's a repetition of the same symbolism. It's
again the first chakra, you say.
It's that the sexual integrity of the Western people was destroyed. Yeah. But there was a pushback, so it's still in the balance. But well, we're going to stay victorious according to the symbolism.
We can't.
We will stay victorious.
We take the battle then back to Sauron.
Sauron, yeah, well, it means if we restore our integrity, if we manage to restore our relationships, if we manage to bring healing in the relationships between men and women, if we can provide the context where our families can prosper again, that's when we win. And we stay victorious over the negativity that try to destroy us. Well, Sauron is the people who thrive on the misery of others. I mean, they're pushing the whole of mankind into misery and trying to control us that way. And if we don't allow to be, they rule by us fighting one another instead of cooperating. But if we manage to change our consciousness so that we actually manage to cooperate and work together on the solutions, then they lose all their power. It's basically what we need.
And how did you, because now we're talking about symbolism for our spiritual journey, but you also connected that to money, to the monetary system, the same story.
Yeah, well, yes, because monetary was... Maybe we'd have to do another one only about money, because the whole thing is so complex. Yes, the people who today try to enslave mankind, they took control of our monetary system in some centuries back, right?
Yeah.
So what you have in Tolkien's world, you have the moment, you had the period where the One Ring was absent, which was a period in the Middle Ages where we didn't have the interest money that we have. We had some forms of interest-free flowing money where taking loans didn't mean that people would be exploited. There was no exploitation as we know it, has been common in our time. So that period ended because those just systems that we had in the Middle Ages in Europe, they collapsed because of upcoming greed, right? And that's in the symbolism of Deagle and Smeagol, because Deagle is looking and he's finding the ring, and then Smeagol is taking it, and Deagle is just the inquisitive mind looking for new possibilities, and him finding the One Ring means that there were people thinking about how they could become rich at the expense of others, which means there was an upcoming greed in the Middle Ages. And when that happened, Gollum is the tendency or the habit of humans. When we see something, we want to have it, right?
Yeah.
Like small children, they see something and they want to have it. So that was Smeagol. And the symbolism means that when certain people understood how they could become rich at the expense of others, then their own desire for money and power, they took over and killed their own thinking. Smeagol killed Deagle, which means the proper thinking was eliminated, and the desire for money and power. And that's when the whole problem that we today have started. It was about 700 years ago, when the just systems of the Middle Ages started to collapse. And with the return of the interest money, and we had this ongoing redistribution of wealth, and which means that richer and richer people developed. And after, when was it, in the 17th century, the high finance returned, which is still the families that rule this planet today. And they founded the Bank of England in 1694. That was about the time when Sauron returned. That was Sauron's return in our time.
Mm.
And then, so they first took control of the money, and the money has a certain effect on the human thinking, on the mind. And what Tolkien shows is how they collected more and more political power, but also how the effects of the money changed the human mind and changed the way we were as human beings, because it became more and more negative. And there were more and more wars. There was more and more super wealth developing, and since the 19th century, there's more and more poverty on this planet, and it's getting worse and worse and worse because of the money. And it's been an ongoing process over the last 700 years, and it's only today coming to a climax where we have to produce this spiritual transformation to become free from this way of running our economy. We have to find a way to produce a just economy where people are no longer exploited.
So what's the symbolism of the ring?
The ring itself.
The ring itself.
Well, it has a meaning in the mind, and also a meaning in the outer world. So the ring was created in Mount Doom, in the abyss of Mount Doom, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it came from. So the abyss of Mount Doom symbolizes guilt, the sense of guilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ring is the projection of guilt. That is when we have a sense of feeling guilty, that we project this onto others and say, no, it's your fault. It's all your fault. That's what the One Ring does. And if our mind, our collective mind, is run through this type of mindset that people are just looking for other people's faults, to see whom they can blame, right? Instead of taking personal responsibilities for the things that we want to see, then you can introduce a monetary system where constantly there's a when you take a loan, when you take an interest loan for interest, you are burdened with having to pay so much interest. Yes, which means that is a situation where the one who gives the loan can constantly demand you to pay down debt, and you as a person who's taken the loan, you have to pay and pay and pay and pay. So there's no more balance. It's one who is always right, and it's one who is always wrong in terms of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? It's like when you always have to pay, you're being constantly blamed. It's the same as on the consciousness level. It's the whole world is separated in those who can always demand, you have to give me, and all those who have to pay.
I understand.
And that's basically the split of mankind. We are split in two, where the vast majority has to struggle to live or to survive, because we always have to pay. And there's those who can always demand, because they are always right. They have all the rights on their side.
Yes.
They have all the money on their side. And because they have the money, they are always right. What they say is true. What everybody else says is wrong.
I understand.
So that's a reflection of the mindset, where people only care about if they can blame.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of mindset we have to overcome to create a just monetary system. So, well, that's the One Ring.
No, it's perfectly understood. I understand you perfectly, how you make the connection there. We have less than 1 minute, so we can either leave it here, or I can send you another link and finish, because it will stop now. Okay. So, all right. Before we close this conversation, will you tell us your website where we can find you and the English versions of your books, and even the German? I don't know. Maybe some people can speak German and they can read your books in German.
Yes, of course, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes, it's. I'll give you the link to put in the video description so they can find it there. It's 9net, and it's the two books that have been published in English so far is ebooks only, so I cannot deliver paper books at this point. And it's the Symbolism of Tolkien is one, and where the whole book is about explaining all the different figures in the Lord of the Rings and their meaning.
Spiritually and monetary, or?
Yes, both. It's one chapter only about the monetary aspect, exactly, and then about the spiritual meaning of all the figures. Yeah. And there's one book called The Ringwraith Annihilation, which is the end of the Lord of the Rings, which refers to our time and the future, the interpretation with what is happening at this point and what is going to happen according to the symbolism in the Lord of the Rings.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you'll give me the links and I'll post them.
Yes, I will.
That's great. While I was sending you the third invitation, I was thinking I'm gonna have a real trouble finding a title for this conversation. How am I gonna call it? I mean, what do you think? What's your suggestion? What did we talk about?
You could make different videos of this, because only one on the Bible.
And no, because we did return to talking on the second recording. So it's a bit of a mixture.
It always somehow with me it always comes back to the Tolkien, because that's where I started from. Yes,
and also it's extremely it's extremely interesting, and I think most of the people have watched if they haven't read it, at least they have watched The Lord of the Rings, so they're familiar with the story.
The symbolism.
Yeah. And I'm not sure I understood. I'm not sure how did we decide how we gain access to the language of symbolism, to this? Is it given to us? Do we have it inside of us and we just gain access? How is this process being done? Did we decide?
Well, that's a language. I think the spiritual symbolic, the spiritual symbolism is, I think, something that is present all over the planet, and it's somehow every human being understands this. I mean, you can't say understand, because that's the mind, because we don't understand it with our thinking mind, but it speaks to us. And so there's something that gets to us, that when we get inside what it means. And why that is so, I don't really know.
So you're saying basically that we are born with the ability to speak and understand that symbolic language. Every human being.
Yeah, the word understand is so big, because that refers to our mind. And our mind, when we read the fairy tales or hear them, we don't understand them in that sense, but they do speak to us.
No, but I think unconsciously,
yes,
symbols speak to us, even if we're not, cognitively aware that we're.
Yes, they do speak, and we have this level. So we always have the potential of understanding them, because that's the way our spirit speaks. And if you have, of course, there are. If you talk about dreams, of course, there are some nonsensical dreams, but there are a lot of dreams which are full of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And the language of the dreams is very similar also to the symbolic language that the fairy tales are written in.
Yeah.
So I found I have had readers, German readers here, who wrote back to me, I'm so grateful for your book on the fairy tales, because since I read that, I can understand my own dreams. Because I explain how the symbolic language works, and then people tell me now they can now interpret their own dreams and understand them. Because we use this language all the time when we dream.
So would you say that symbolism is more powerful than words?
Oh, it is, yes. It is. And it's better to be very aware of the symbolism, because the elite, I wouldn't call them elites, maybe predators who try to get control of mankind, they are very well aware of the power of symbols, and they use it all the time to our disadvantage. And it's better we are aware of what they're doing, and we are aware of the positive possibilities of symbolic language.
That's what I was thinking of when I ask you if everybody can speak that symbolic language, because I'm aware that we're being bombarded with symbols and symbolism, and
Yes.
even if people do not understand this, I think they're being influenced, even subconsciously or unconsciously. So, yeah, that was
very much influenced.
Yeah,
very much influenced. Yes.
Yeah. But we do know.
And it's better we become aware so that we know what is being done to us.
And you're saying
when
that
we are aware, we cannot be manipulated.
Yes, yes, in all levels. Yes, definitely.
Yes.
And you're saying that this symbolic language is the language of our true self.
Yes. Of our spiritual self. Yes. Yeah.
And words came after what? It's a human physical situation.
Yeah, it's a different level. The spiritual level we bring into this life and we take it out again. I mean, if you see a newborn, just a day old, and you see in the eyes, you can see the love, you can see the joy, you can see the innocence, you can see the awareness, the presence of the spirit. And that's all there is. And the energetic and mental layers, they come later during our childhood. And the energetic layers, they really develop in the first 3 years, when it's about how we feel provided for, when it's about how satisfied we are, or how much we want to have things, or how much satisfaction we can feel for ourselves if we don't get everything we want. That's what we learn in early childhood. And the third thing is how on the energetic level, how we feel in the togetherness with others, if we feel like there's a brotherly togetherness, or if we feel we are being disadvantaged in comparison to others. So that's these things we learn in the first 3 years, and then come the mental layers only, starting with the 4th year, which is about our self-esteem, then about our possibility in life, how the power we feel that we can create the world we want to create. And then the 6th thing which makes us human is integrity, learning to what rules mean, that we have to abide by rules, that when we agree something, that we have to stick to it, and to think these things that make up integrity, starts in the 6th year of our life. So it develops successively. And then,
I can tell you it's very difficult.
What?
I said, as a mother of a 6
yeah, they don't like, they don't, when they see that
really
rules,
difficult to teach them integrity.
Yeah. When they know that rules are to their disadvantage, they don't want to know about them. No, I don't want to. I just want to do what I want.
Yes. Yes. Correct. All right. I'm really curious. How was that symbolic language developed? How did it come about? What's its origin? I'm not sure there's an answer to that, but I'm still questioning.
Yes, the oldest texts of mankind, which are from Vedic times, which are said to be thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, which were written in this, which were held in this symbolic language. According to the Vedic tradition of India, they were all given to us by rishis, by prophets, by people who could see the truth. They could see the truth of the human spirit.
Is it a language that the spirit uses? And if you have access to that spiritual world, you can gain access to this language and start channeling it and understanding it and communicating with it.
Yeah, that's basically what spiritual masters do. They are very much established in this presence, in this spiritual presence, and they can use it. They can use this language like we speak with normal language.
But if we believe that, you know, we're all one, then that spiritual realm, that language is also inside of us.
Yes, it is. But still, it's still a learning process to get the awareness of it.
Remember it.
To remember it. It's in us, but the understanding is something we need to develop. So to understanding is when things come from the spiritual, also into the mind, that we can give words to it, that we have a mental understanding of this. It's like the difference between sun and moon. You know, the sun is the self, shines from itself. Our spiritual self shines from itself. And the moon is shone upon by the sun. And the moon is a symbol for the human mind, which is just reflecting the light of the self. So that in our thinking mind, we get a proper understanding of who we are, who we are spiritually.
Is that symbolism between the sun and the moon?
How I would put it.
Important? Huh? Is the symbolism of the sun and the moon important to that language? That the moon shines on its. I'm sorry, the sun shines on its own, and the moon reflects.
Yes, like our thinking mind only reflects our true self. We are not what we think, but we are who we are. But if we think properly, we can get a proper picture, a proper understanding of who we are on an understanding level. I don't know how to put it differently.
No, I understand it. It's just that I understand what you're saying. It's just that there are people who believe that the moon also has its own light. I'm sorry, it's not. It doesn't reflect the sun's light. It's also a source of its own different light. And then, if that was the case,
who says that?
Who says that? People who measure, you know, the temperature of the moonlight, and they find it colder than.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter. I'm just saying, is it a prerequisite? If the moon was indeed, I don't know, once in a million, they were right, and the moon and the moon doesn't reflect the sunlight, then then that symbolism changes, or it stays the same? Of the mind reflecting. Do you understand where I'm going?
But basically, the symbolism is there to give an understanding of what is happening within us, right? And if we find that the symbolism isn't used properly because the analogy no longer holds, then we'd have to think about it. But so far, I would say what the symbolism means is that the moon is shone upon and doesn't have its own light. It doesn't have its own sunlight, so to say.
Yeah, yeah. So the mind still is empty without the light from you know, the soul, the spirit.
Without our spiritual self, we would have no understanding of anything. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I get that. Okay, I think I found the title for this conversation. It will, it will involve the language of symbols or symbolism or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Okay.
Okay.
Ludwig, I'm gonna let you go now properly. Thank you very much for this discussion. Going into talking is I don't know, I find it fascinating. It's one of my favorite stories. I won't say movies, because the books were also amazing. And I find I cannot understand how one person can invent different languages, different maps, different worlds, not just stories, but a different reality. He invented a whole reality. It's
yes, he did.
It's beyond my my humble mind. Yeah.
Me too. It's beyond me. Particularly, my awe has become bigger and bigger when I understood that it was not only, from my perspective, it was not only fantasy, but there is so much depth and so much precision in what he is writing. The more I understood, the more I was just like, oh,
yes,
unbelievable.
Exactly. Listen, it's so. It cannot be just a story, just a fairy tale. When you have put on so much work on designing your own universe, he designed. I mean, he has his own creation story. He designed. It's he played God. He created a. He played God. He created a new reality. It can't be just a story for him. Definitely not. It's definitely something more.
No.
Than just a fairy tale.
Not considering how deeply it touches people.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Ludwig. So have a great.
Maria, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Have a great rest of the day. Please send me the relevant links so I can post them.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, and maybe we'll chat again. It would be nice. Maybe we can go deeper into talking and not all over the place. Just stay focused next time.
Yes, why not? Would be my pleasure.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay, Maria.